Let me just pop this up first. Let's see how that goes. Can you see me guys there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're seeing you.
Good, 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 good. All right, so, well, make yourself comfortable. It's great, we're home. See, I drink my ice cream. Just ask questions as much as you can. This is, we'll talk about nymphing. We'll talk virtually about what people do in Europe, because it is way different than what we do here. And we have to be very, very honest with ourselves. They're way ahead of us when it comes to all that stuff. So I brought a few things, but we'll see that later. We'll see. Let's talk quickly. Well, we'll talk about this later. Hold on a second. There we go. So we'll talk about the evolving methods. Basically what is nymphing, what's going on, where it comes from, where it's going. We'll talk about the equipment, because the equipment is quite important. We'll talk about the current stage in the US, the current stage in Europe, and we'll talk about what technique do they use, where and how. And as I said, that actually came up with something a few days ago. Something showed up, so I'm going to share that with you. It's kind of interesting too. Please stop me if you have questions. Don't hesitate, and we'll move from there. So what is nymphing? I mean, nymphing is a very simple thing. It's basically we are presenting a nymph stage insect, a nymphal stage insect at the fish on a dead drift situation, pretty much at the bottom, but not quite at the bottom. I'll come back to that later on. Let me just see what. Yeah. So the idea there is the following: fish are not really well, most of the feeding they're doing is down. I mean, if you take that Euro-Nymphing system and you compare to the rest, you put dry fly fishing, you put regular nymphing with an indicator floating on top, you take wet fly fishing, you take streamer fishing, you bring those four combined together, and then you take your nymphing on the side. Your nymphing will beat them on matter of numbers, 1 to 5 any day of the year. It is a dreadful technique. Anyone can do it. It is very simple. It's getting simpler and simpler all the time, and that works very well. So we'll see that. So we had a bunch of, at the beginning they were using, somebody invented a pheasant tail somewhere in England that created a scandal. The Brits really did not like it, and they were using a tapered leader, like what we use for dry fly. And they were casting upstream. They were watching the tip end of their fly line floating, any sign of movement of that tip, and they would set the hook, and that would be the beginning of nymphing, pretty much. And then they just figure out, if we put something floating on top that goes with the current, we can have longer drift. So the strike indicator bobber just came in play. The problem with that was that that indicator is moving at the speed of the current on top. And at the bottom, we have current that are much, much slower. So that indicator on top was dragging those nymphs at high speed at the bottom, virtually like a Sputnik. And the fish would see them coming so fast, they would just hide for cover, at all costs. So that was an issue that was resolved. And I want to say one thing before I keep going. When you look at fly fishing today, there is a lot of things that are evolving, and there are a lot of things that are very stagnant. When was the last time we saw some evolution on wet fly fishing? That is not very often. I mean, what we did 5 years ago is the same that we do today. When was the last time we saw evolution in dry fly fishing, except one that I just going to mention later on? Not quite that much. It's very static. And the world of competitive fly fishing is changing all this. Nymphing is something that evolves drastically all the time. The future of fly fishing is virtually in the hands of competitors. Those competitors will dictate what our kids are going to do. And the interesting part is what's next. So, and then we'll see that what's next at the end. But we want to keep an eye on those competitive fly fishing, even though it's not what we do, even though it is not what we want to do. It is something that fly fishing is very strongly anchored to right now. It didn't exist. We didn't see this coming. This was not present 15 years ago. And suddenly it's all over the place. Anyway, so leaving the indicator, which was a major improvement compared to your taper leader, well, the rule of fly fishing and competition say you cannot have an indicator. You got to figure out something else. So people came up with the coil, the zigzag. Those things are, just to see if I have one here. Now I have a picture of it later. Those things, you can make them float. You can also suspend them, and they do work very well. Just for information, a coil is made very simply. You take a screw, you take a piece of monofilament, you wrap it around the screw, you dump the screw into boiling water, you take the screw out, dump it in the freezer, you have a thermal shock that occur, then the next day you remove that monofilament from that screw, and that monofilament will stay in the shape of the coil of the screw. So you can make them very easily, and then you can color them the way you want using those things, or you can like this, or you can buy some monofilament that's already colored. Zigzag is the same idea, but it's not wrapped around the screw, it's wrapped around the ruler. So that has a flat, and each time you wrap around the ruler, it creates an angle, a corner, and it's extremely visible. It's a beautiful thing. The problem of those two things, coil and zigzag, is when it's time to set the hook, you have to unfold the entire system before you can move your flies. So that was an issue. It also takes a lot of sensitivity out of the system, which makes life a little harder. And then the common sense was, well, let's forget about the coil, let's forget about the zigzag, let's just make a sider that's straight. And that's what we see today. So that's basically what nymphing evolvement, has pushed today. And then we'll see, because the next step is the sider does not disappear, but kind of. But I'll mention that to you later on. So the rods that we use, they're specifically designed to cast a leader. We can say whatever we want. A nymphing rod will cast a leader better than a dry fly rod, and a dry fly rod will cast a dry fly line better than a nymphing rod. So yes, we can shoot elephant with a 12 gauge, but it's not very pretty. We can go on the ocean, catch tuna on a 5-weight rod. It's possible, but it's not really meant to be. So I suggest everybody to if you get into that game, get something specific. It makes a huge difference. So those rods are fairly long. They're anywhere from 9 feet, 9 inches, all the way to the longest one I've seen recently is 11.9 or almost 12 feet. The rule of competition also stipulate now that your leader from the fly line all the way to your point fly, which is the last one, can no longer be more than twice the length of the rod. So the competitors are looking for longer rods. I've seen some sample 12 and a half feet that don't wobble, which is quite interesting. So we'll see that more and more. The reel, I hope nobody from Orvis is around. I like my reel. That is an important part of my equipment. I do not spare money on my reel. My reel have to work. They have to work really well. They have to let go without me feeling them. Basically, you have your tip like this. You have a fish on. The tip is banded. If your reel let go and then stop, your tip does this. And the fish spit the fly. So when you have a fish on, you want that line to get off your reel. You do not want to notice it. You do not want to feel it. It has to be very, very soft. So a good reel is very important. I'm not going to mention those reels that have auto retrieve, but we see them. They're very useful. The fly line that we use is pretty much there to say that we fly fish, but we really don't use it. I mean, my fly line stays in my reel. Very, very rarely they come out of my reel. They're there just to support, my leader, and that's about it. The thinner, the better, for the simple reason, the less weight you carry, the better off you are, because your arm is in that position all day, and your shoulder take a beat up. So the least amount of equipment you carry, the better off you are. So the leader, that's what we have right now. So we have leaders that are made out of Maxima or different kind of monofilament. The average leader in the US is around between 0.25 and 0.45 millimeter, which is fairly thick. 0.25 millimeter is the equivalent of 2x. Something like this. So I mean, it's pretty thick. And then on the right hand side of your screen, you have one of mine. My biggest one, my thickest one is 0.20 millimeter. It is, yeah, and again, I can go down in size down to 0.10 millimeters. Sometimes I can go even thinner if I need to. Those things are different. They get you tangled real quick when you don't know how to use them. They make knots that are not described in any books. They do not last very long. So they're like a tire on your car. After a certain amount of miles, that's done. You got to change it. But they're a lot more efficient, and we'll see why later on. But the advantage of a thick leader is it's great to start with. That leader will last you all season long. It's very efficient. It catches more fish than any other way, except with a thinner leader. But it's great to start with. It gives you the idea, the conception. It helps you understand how the whole system works. So for learning, I put all my clients on thicker leader, and then I go down in size as they pick up momentum and they understand what it does. Then we start to get into the business of getting thinner and thinner. So the tippet ring, those are very important. We use them all the time. Do I have? No, I don't. So tippet ring, if I fish by myself, I don't use them. I will make a perfection loop and I loop to loop everything. It's much easier because for a very simple reason. I mean, you all have had a 2 millimeter ring in your hand. It doesn't weigh much. But when you're looking at those thin and light equipment, that tippet ring weighs a ton and start to make corners in your line. It creates angle. It pulls your system. There is some disadvantage of it. But I'll tell you this, for guiding, it's great. You clip it off, clip a new one on, you're done. I mean, it's very fast. So it has some advantage. Use it, they're great. Now, so that's the famous conversation. I think some of you heard me talking about this before. There is the discussion of monofilament versus fluorocarbon. So I do not use fluorocarbon. I only use monofilament. And when I have the time, I boil the monofilament to make it more supple, more flexible, more stretchable. The reason behind this is the following. If you have a cargo ship 500 feet long, fill up to the gill with containers, it arrives in New York City, they're going to take 5 tugboats to pull it in the port. They are not going to use chains, which is a higher pound test. They are going to use nylon rope. It gives. And that's the same idea here, is we want to have a fish hooked to a rubber band, not to something stiff. The other reason also is the fluorocarbon, when it's subsurface, being very stiff, will disturb your fly and will not let them be free to go with the current. And we want the current to carry your fly. We're just here to keep them suspended at the right depth. But we do not want to disturb the fly going into the current. So fluorocarbon, it's difficult. People will tell me, well, yeah, but it's invisible. Well, if I look at flies, I mean, oops, you can see the hook, and it's much thicker than a piece of monofilament. So the way I look at it, this is this way. If they don't mind the hook, I don't think they're going to mind monofilament. Fish pretty much have 2 counters in vision. It's like in your car. So they're like this, and you have fear, and then you have feeding, and it goes up and down like this. You know? So when nothing happens, the feeding is always high, and then the fear comes up and the feeding goes down. So the goal of what we do is try to keep the fear down so the feeding stays up. As long as the feeding stays up, you'll catch fish. As soon as the feeding goes down, it is not happening anymore. If I have a problem with my monofilament, I'll go with the thinner one. So I'll go 5X first, then I'll go down to 6, then I'll go down to 7. If I need to, I'll go down to 8. Most of the time, my monofilament is going to be determined, the size of it is going to be determined on the size of the fly. So early in the spring, I will fish a size 12 flies. At that point, I'm going to use 5X. In the middle of summer, you know, late July, August, beginning of September, it's spooky, low water. I use 6 if I get away with it, 7 if I don't, and if I'm having problem, I use 8. And then if I catch 2 fish in a place and then nothing, and I know there's more, hold on. Somebody's joining us. I have to admit them now. So if I pick up 2 fish in an area, I'm on 5X, then nothing. Well, I'm going to take the same flies, smaller, thinner tippet. I'll do the same thing. I'll probably pick up another 2, and then nothing happened. I go down in size again, and I will pick up another 2. And instead of catching 2 fish in a spot and leaving, well, you catch 6, and then you leave and you go to the next spot. So the monofilament is, I mean, to my opinion and to the opinion of a lot of anglers in Europe, is the way to go. And if you want to boil them, 5X, you boil them 7 seconds, and 6X, you boil them 5 seconds, to give you an idea. And 5 and 6 is going to be your bread and butter on that game. I mean, we're not here to catch multiple amount of fish. We're here to have fun, get a few fish on, and get out. So we don't have to be like, you know, super, super acute. Flies. So those are the flies that I use for nymphing. So if you look on your left of the screen, you have a classic pheasant tail, and on the right-hand side, you have something called a perdigon. If I dump those two flies into a jar of water, the one on the left will have covered only a third of the way. The one on the right will be at the bottom. So those flies do sink extremely fast, the one on the right, and they carry the same amount of weight. So that advantage is the current carry them pretty much the same way, even though they don't have as much drag, but they don't get hung up as much. So to get down, you don't need big flies. And then something that I do, I'll try to show this if you can see it. I'll try to see if it's possible to do this. So this is one of my fly box. This is not doing well because it reflects. No, it doesn't do well at all. I can't. But basically, it's extremely fluorescent. A lot of hot spot. A lot of my fly have them in the tail, in the neck. We use different colors: orange, red, green, yellow. And that's it helps. I mean, fish see UV light, they see that hot spot and they go for it. If you open a box of Rapala lures and you are under UV light, that thing is so flashy, it's ridiculous. It's the same idea. And then I wanted to mention one thing and I forgot, but that will come back to me later on. I'm sure I'll think about this. No question about the flies? Here it goes.
And I'm sorry, Antoine, real quick on the flies. You don't have to go back to the screen, but do you prefer a jig hook over a regular hook, or depend on the style?
I'll use jig hook very often, and I have tendency right now to use a lot of the curved hook, those shrimp hook. Let me see if I have some here.
Like a caddis style hook?
Yes, it has that shape like this, round, right?
Now, do you use a heavier weighted hook, or do you go with the light hooks, or is it depending on the variability of the water?
So the more I'm doing this, the lighter I get with the hook. The more discreet the hook is, the better off you are. The other thing is, now that I remember, is there are four things that you look on a fly when you do this. Well, when you look at dry fly, you're looking at size, shape, color, and behavior. Here we're looking at weight, color, shape, and then the behavior. And the weight is the most important part. When I tie my fly, first I pick my hook. So I'm going to have an idea of what my fly is going to look like, the size of it and the shape of it. Then I'm going to pick my bead. And my bead, I'm going to have to pick the size of it. And I'm going to mention something else later on. So it's going to be 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and 4. Basically, those are the sizes that are available in the US. So I'm going to pick the size that I want. And then I'm going to have to pick the color of the bead. The most color that I use on bead are usually copper, silver, gold, and black. I will use a few pink one, a few red one, but virtually the bulk of what I do is silver, copper type, gold, and black. And copper is probably the one that I spend the most attention right now. So does this answer your question? He's gone. He went to get a beer. All right. So the current stage on the US is the following. I kind of mentioned that before. Everything is big. Everything is bulky. It is quite remarkable. It does work, but it is what the Europeans were doing about 15 years ago. We have to be straight ahead with this. And there's nothing bad about it. It's just I wish everybody would catch up quicker. The current stage in Europe, so they do use that up to about 2 months ago. I was not supposed to mention what it was, but now somebody goofed over there. So now I don't feel obligated to hide it. It's the Suffix Ultranaut. That stuff is difficult to get. There's very little available, especially in size from 0.14 millimeter all the way to 0.20 millimeter. Those are difficult size to get. I place a bunch of orders all the time. Nothing comes. It's a nightmare. But from time to time, I get some. So this is nice. See, they come like this. So, I mean, you can try to find it. Good luck. Yeah, it's just difficult to find. There are not too many people who use that stuff. So the demand is pretty high. The production of that equipment is very low. And when it becomes available, everybody jumps on it, and that's the end of that. And those stores, there are 2 stores in France that sell them. They know exactly who wants what and when. I mean, they order as much as they can, and then they make a phone call. They tell you, okay, I got X amount of spool for you. Do you want it? That's it. So this is how we deal with this. If you look at European also, they do not look at pound test. I mean, I've asked them, I mean, what is the pound test on this? And they look at me with eyes like an owl, and they have no idea. They're looking at stretch, limpiness, I mean, no memory. That stuff come out of the spool, it stays straight. I mean, this has been in the spool since it was made. Let's see what it does. We'll see. Take a piece. I need my glasses. I can't see squat. Here it is. See, that's my glasses for making watches. So I take a piece like this. It is absolutely straight. I mean, there's no memory in that thing. I mean, it's just straight. It doesn't memorize anything. So that's something we really like. Every time you memorize something, it pulls on your system. It doesn't let it free. It's just more difficult. Just put this away without making a mess. All right. So anyway, that's what we're doing. Now that I'm going to talk about this, I want to mention one thing. We're going to jump back and forth on dry fly fishing here. So this is a leader that I make for dry fly fishing. So that thing is boiled. The formula is very simple. If you have a pen and paper, it's a good idea to note that. It's basically a gallon of water. Then you add a box of salt, those round cylinder box of salt, sea salt. You add to it. You put 2 liters of fabric softener, and you bring it to a boil, and then you bring this in, and depending on the diameter, you boil it at different amount of seconds, depending on the diameter of the line. And you get something, I mean, I wish you would be here because I would pass it around. That thing stretch like there's no tomorrow. I mean, it's like molasses almost. So this has the same idea that what we do for nymphing, but to dry fly fishing. That leader here that I fish on the Farmington is rarely under 20 feet. Most of the time, as soon as I'm in a big pool or I have space or I'm casting over 40 feet away, that leader is going to be 25, 28 feet in length. That leader, you build them, and then you finish your leader. It's finished by 4x, the equivalent of 4x. You make a perfection loop at the end. From that perfection loop to your fly line, that will stay with you all season long. It will not move. And then at the perfection loop, you can loop your tippet, and you attach your tippet and you change your tippet as needed. And the advantage of the loop is you can go, you can attach a piece of 5x as well as you can attach a piece of 8x right off the bat. It is very nice. The tapered that you can do here very easily without getting any problem is you take a 9-foot 0x, then you add 1 foot, I'm sorry, you had 2 feet of 1x, 2 feet of 2x, 2 feet of 3x, 2 feet of 4x, you put your loop, and then your tippet is at the end, and your tippet can be anywhere from, depending on the situation, from 5 all the way to 8, 10 feet. The trick of this at the beginning, and I really suggest everybody to do it, but the trick at the beginning is the following. When we're used to fish, 10, 12, 15 foot long leader, our fly line is going to be approximately, you're going to be 8 feet away from your fly, somewhere around there. Here, you have to have your fly line 12, 15 feet away from your fly, at least. Otherwise, you cannot set the hook. By the time you pick up all the slack, the tip of your rod is on another continent, it's over. So you have to get used at the beginning. You cast and make sure the tip of your fly line is far away from your fly. The advantage of a long leader, for example, on a flat pool, everybody knows Greenwood, for example. In Greenwood, for example, I multiply my take by 5 because the presentation is so superior with a long leader. It is a complete dead drift, and it's very, very efficient. So I definitely suggest everybody to extend their leader, fish long. Yeah, and everybody say, oh, but you can't cast a leader that long. If you taper it the way I told you properly, and you taper it fairly aggressively, the first 12, 15 feet are very, very thick. That will carry the energy of your fly line, and the rest, will unfold like a regular leader. So, don't have to worry too much about that. It does unfold itself pretty well.
And you're using standard blood knot.
Blood knot, or I'll use triple surgeon's knot. Whatever is easier for you to do is the way to go. I've asked tons of people over there what is the best knot. It created a huge chaos. Everybody has a different opinion, and they all are excellent fly fishermen. The bottom line at the end of the day is whatever knot you like to do that works for you, use it. There's no miracle knot here. I mean, if you like one knot that works for you, just go for it.
So triple, so it comes out straight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's another thing. Let me see if I have this. Oop, where did I put this? All right, so let's try to do this a different way. Aha, I brought this. So, all right, I hope you're ready for this. All right, so do you see this? Okay, so that knot in the middle is a quadruple surgeon's knot. I make a huge loop, I make a quadruple surgeon's knot, and then this is going to be my upper fly. And here I cut it off, unfold it now all the way here, and now I have my second fly here. Does this make sense? So one knot does it all. But this one has to be a quadruple. If you wrap it 3 times, it doesn't work. If you wrap it 5 times, it doesn't work. It has to be wrapped 4 times. That's how I touch my flies. Much easier. It's quicker. It works. And when I came back from Europe and I had that nut in my hand, I was just like, well, this is illogical because the nut come out, it's not in line. So it can't be strong. You have your nut and you have your line going in, and then the tip comes from this end of it. And so you have an angle. If you wrap it 4 times, the last wrap jumps over and capture that thing. And I caught fish over 20 inches in white water on that upper tag. That nut did not let go. So first I was skeptic. I was like, oh, I'm not sure, but it does work. So, you know, do that nut. It's a very useful nut. So but you jump the boat. So yeah, those are the nut that I use all the time. The improved clinch knot, the perfection loop, the triple surgeon's knot, and the quadruple surgeon's knot. That I leave with this. It works. It doesn't fail for me. If it doesn't fail for me, that's good enough. I mean, if you have some knot that you feel comfortable with, use them. Any questions so far? Not losing anyone? So dry fly fishing, I'd mentioned to you that length of leader. This is really, I mean, we're going to see this more and more and more. I mean, you can see already, you know, there are other guys that use that long leader. I mean, if you look at the river, you're looking at 1% of the people catching 99% of the fish. What do? Well, they use a long leader when they dry fly fish. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you know, I'm not going to mention any name, but if you take anybody on the river that we see catching fish after fish all the time, they do use long leader. And trust me, it is not difficult to cast. Just cast it pretty much like a regular leader and there's no issue. So back to nymphing. There is a cast for this. You cannot cast those leader the same way you would cast a very thick leader. So an overhead cast pretty much is not going to go anywhere. You need the tension of the water to create a jumping situation. I'm pretty sure, hold on a second. No, we'll see it later. So basically here I'm facing the center of the stream. You see where my rod is behind me. So that's another thing that I can't do that right here because it is not. That presentation was not done for Zoom. So can you, I'm gonna try to, hold on. Here it goes. There. So here is the angler. Okay. Here's the rod. Here's the current. You follow me there? I'll try to get this so you don't get a reflection of my light. If my leader is this way, if I make a flick with the tip of the rod, it's going to go this way. If my leader is this way, I flick the rod, it's going to go this way. This is the center, the tip of the rod. The leader will go the opposite direction of where the fly comes from. Okay, so my suggestion is you have the shore here like this. You want your leader behind you, and if you move your rod tip this way, now you can cast this way. If you move your rod tip slowly this way, now you can cast this way. This makes sense? So I start all my cast very much with the tip of my rod and my fly behind me. And as I drag them, they stay on top on the surface. And then I can flick my rod and they go. Does this make sense?
So do you have any fly line out, or is it just all leader?
This is overstated. We don't need fly line.
All right.
I know. This is not fly fishing. No, we got to get used to it. Yeah. So that's the cast. And basically your rod tip is going to move like this. You flick the rod, you roll the tip, the fly goes over, and then you lift up your rod, the fly goes in the water, and your sighter never touched the water. Does this make sense? Let's look at the next one. So on this one, I don't know if you can see the line. Can you see the line there? I'll try to do this. I'll do this. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. But basically here, behind me, I started my cast with my. You see that log on the other shore, and then there's an angler standing up in the back.
Yeah.
I put my fly on between those 2 points behind me, and then I cast. If I look at now, I take myself as my, and I look at the water in front of me. I'm going to cast at around between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Does this make sense? I mean, I'm just trying to see. It's difficult for me to show you this. I wish I could put myself on between you and the picture, but it's not possible. Let's go to the next one. It'll make it easier. Let's talk about this real quick. So those are the zones that we target when we use that system. So you have zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. And you notice that arrow at the bottom is way on top of the rock. It's not on the rock. There is that myth that you have to be banging at the bottom to catch fish. No, you bang at the bottom, you catch rocks. You catch trees, branch, leaves, I mean, name it. You're not going to catch fish. Those fish are looking up. They're not looking down. So those 3 little oval that you have, we call them compression zone. The current does not go, if I look, oops. Bear with me as I adapt. So we got this. Lower the screen. Turn the computer. Here's the bottom. Okay, so the current does not do this. That is not happening. The current does not do that. The current does this. Leaving a compression zone right there, one right here, a very small one right there, and one right there. Make sense? Those compression zones do not move. That's where those fish are standing. And those fish are looking up. They're not looking down. Yep. So you want your fly to go, if this is the top, can go this way. This is moving very fast. This is moving a little slower. There it's moving even slower. And then when you arrive here, it's even slower. So you want to put your fly in that last zone before the water doesn't move. And the idea here is the following. You do not want really to see your sighter move. You do not really want to feel a fish take. You really want to see the fish take your fly. If you take 10 fish that takes your fly, we miss approximately 7 or 8 of them. We don't know they take our fly. They take our fly, they spit it out, and that's the end of that. And we just keep drifting and we don't know about it. If you have your fly at the bottom, your fish is getting force-fed straight on. If he opens his mouth and closes it, it's very difficult to see. If your fly drifts on top, the fish is forced to go up. And when he goes up, he does those movements like this. He flash at you. He shows his belly. He opens his mouth. He makes some change of shade of colors at the bottom. It is visible. You see that. You set the hook. You're done. Another thing also is, where do you look when you want to set the hook on those fish? Look at this. You know, even with all that technology, we're going back to those old boards. That must be me. So if I take, here's the surface of the water, and you have a line going subsurface, okay, and here's your fly. Let's say you have a fish at the end. Okay, so you have a fish. Okay. Well, this is a straight line, correct? Oh, sorry. I get it. You gotta stop me if you can't see it, otherwise I feel everybody's sleeping. So this is a straight line, correct? If I am standing right there and I look here, visually here, I'm going to see this, and then it's not going to go straight. Because of the refraction on the surface, it's going this way. When you fight a fish, your line goes straight into the water, then create an angle and go there somewhere else, correct? So if your line is going like this, your surface is here, here is your sider, your tippet is going this way, and you're standing right there, don't look here, look right there. Oops. You see what I mean? So you're standing here, surface of the water is right there, your sider is right here. You know your flies are here. Don't look here, you're here. Look a little further away than where your flies are. And that's where you're going to see that fish take. Yes? I'm not quite sure everybody understands because I don't hear any clap, any noise, nothing. I don't hear anyone scream. I don't even hear people licking their ice cream.
They're all threatened with muting, so.
No. All right, so let's say you catch fish on zone 1. Well, let's say use a size 16 fly with a bead that is 2.5 millimeter. Well, instead of that, if I catch them on zone 1, I'm going to take the same fly with a bead that is smaller. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm going to make my fly go through zone 1 slower, and I stay in that kill zone longer. If they take on zone 2, I take the same fly with a bead a little bigger, so I get earlier on zone 2 and I stay there later. And then on zone 3, if they take it on zone 3, I take exactly the same fly with a bead that even bigger, and it takes the fly longer to just rise through the currents and come up. So try to maximize the time I keep my fly in the kill zone as much as I can. And then one thing I want to mention is here we have beads that are 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc., etc. They go by 0.5 millimeter. In Europe, it goes 1, 1.2, 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, which makes your choice a lot more acute, so you can have a better, you can choose a better weight for the water you're fishing at that moment. Another thing to be said is my tippet at the end of my tippet ring at the bottom of my sider, I change this all the time. I don't fix it, I change it. I walk 10 feet, I'm in 2 feet less water or a foot less water, I'm gonna change this and drift it differently. So, you know, adapting and changing the tippet and your flies is very important at that game.
So Antoine, if you're fishing new water, I mean, you know every hole north of Collinsville in that river. So you know the depth, you know what the conditions are like. You're fishing new water. How long do you fish a spot or a zone for? I mean, you just mentioned changing flies 3 times, because I see these guys that are nymphing and they're cast moving. Do you spend time in one hole or do you keep moving?
So if I fish by myself, I really spend much more than 15, 20 minutes in one place. I mean, I'm going to cover that zone properly. I know I'm at the right depth. I know I have the right flies. If it doesn't work, I'm out of here, period. I mean, somebody fished it right before me. This could be that the fish are completely stressed. It could be that I spooked them. It could be multiple reasons. I don't want to know about it. I'm not here to compete. I'm not here to absolutely catch a fish. So I'm going to go away from that place, and I'll find a fish that's more cooperative. That's all. And that's really how I look at it. And if you look for places to fish, it is so simple. I mean, people fish always at the same place. All you have to do is walk 100 feet, left or right, it doesn't matter, and go just 100 feet away from the beaten path. And you have fish there that have never seen a fly. They don't even know what a fly is. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
I guess the confusion people that I've talked to have is, you know, how do you know how deep it is? I mean, you know, you're not standing in the hole, so you can't tell that way. I mean, right. How do you know how deep it is and whether your fly is on the bottom without getting hooked up?
Okay, so first of all, most of the time you can see the bottom. And if you cannot see the bottom, then I'm going to go a very, very long tippet. I want to gauge where the bottom is. That's my first mission before I catch a fish. I want to know where the bottom is. So I'm going to take some size 12, 4 mil bead, dump it in the water with a very long tippet, and see what happens. As soon as I touch the bottom, I'm going to cut tippet off from the tippet ring and shrink my tippet. After 3 casts, I'll know where the bottom is. I'll know what it looks like. I know where the big rocks are, where the small one. If there's a branch, I'll know. If there's a tree, I'll know. I mean, you have a good design after 3 drift. You have a good design of what's happening down. And then you pick the right flies. You have the right lengths of tippet. You make a nice drift. Usually it works.
Easy peasy.
Well, I mean, you know, you gotta try.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get there by just doing it once.
Right.
It's like everything else. I mean, it's just, and it's not for everybody. You know, at the beginning, I will say, don't do this. At the beginning, use a bigger leader, bigger tippet, use stuff that are easy to manipulate. This is exactly the same thing that if you ask a beginner to go in Greenwood fishing Ned Hammy with a 25-foot long leader on 8X. It is not going to happen. You're going to have a tangle and a big mass if you do that. So at the beginning, beginner, we just give them a 9-foot long leader, a nice big fly that they can roll over easily, and they get a hang of it, and then they get to this. So, it just, you have to go step by step.
Antoine, I'm sorry, I did have a question. Can you speak to arm and shoulder fatigue and pain? Do you have some tips on that and properly holding the rod?
Surgery. No, the way to do it is, well, first of all, when you cast, try to cast by using the least amount of strength possible, which means let the equipment work for you. I mean, if you leave the equipment work for you, you don't have to do the work. Second of all, you do not have to fish all day with your arm like this. Again, we're not competing. We're not here to get more fish than the guy next door. This is not the goal. The goal is to enjoy yourself. So if your arm hurts, just fish like normal. I mean, don't hurt yourself. There's no, at my age, there's no return. I can't get younger. So yes, my arm gets beat up and my body gets beat up. And so I just adapt position and try to get the equipment to work as much as I can. So I do as little as possible and I save my body. But there's no, I mean, if you fish with your arm extended all day, you're going to feel it in your shoulder. There's no doubt about it. It's like if you ski all day hard on moguls, you're going to feel it in your knees. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's just, it's inevitable. Michael, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. So let's proceed with the next one. So I hope everybody can see the green line and the red line in the middle of the screen.
Yes.
The green line is the current. And what you try to avoid is your nymph to do what the red line does. And what the red line does is when you move the tip of your rod a lot.
Antoine, can you hear me?
Yes.
I couldn't get in, but when you were talking about in some of the other videos that I've watched, one of the gentlemen presenting was talking about rod balance. When your arm is extended,
Yes.
really have a rod that is very well balanced so that you're not clenching it and
Yes.
stressing your arm.
Yes, good point. I forgot to mention this. Yes, all my rod are well balanced and extremely light. Yes. Yes, you want to have a rod that's well balanced. It does help. Yes, you're right.
Okay,
Yes.
thank
So
you.
Michael, yeah, that's another answer. Yes, a balanced rod and balanced equipment definitely helps you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, James, thank you for bringing that up because otherwise, yeah, I forgot. So if I cast, you see me facing the water there, and if I cast towards the letter T of the word doesn't, that's going to be my direction. And then my tip is not going to point any further than the letter S of the word so. So it goes from those 2 points. And on between, instead of moving my rod, you see my left hand, I'm stripping my line. So instead of moving the rod, I strip my leader back in order to keep my rod tip not traveling much. As soon as I make my tip travel in an arc, my tip move my flies across from the current. If I keep my tip as flat as possible in front of me, the better off I am. Also,
Antoine, if you're stripping your line like
Yep.
that, which makes
Yep.
sense, can you elaborate a little bit more on why you think it's important to have like an exceptional reel with a good drag? If you're just holding the line with your hand, what is the drag?
When I do this, my line is in my right hand.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But my left thumb is also pulling on the line. So my left thumb is in contact with my right hand and with the reel.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I control the line with my right hand. If I have a take, I can move my rod sideways. I can move my rod up. I can pick up all that slack gently without disturbing anything. And the fish is back on the reel immediately.
So, so you're still kind of keeping a tight line.
Yes.
From fly to reel, just with extra tension from your hand.
That's right.
Okay, I see.
And and pulling more or less with my left thumb, I can control how much tightness I apply to the tip of my rod towards the line, towards my flies.
Interesting. Thank you.
So I can have my leader, which will be slightly curved like this, very, very slightly. And at that point, I know that I'm holding my fly just at the right depth, but the current does all the work and the current carries that fly with it. And then if I strip my line slowly, my rod tip doesn't move and I can keep everything as tight as possible without disturbing my fly. If that makes any sense. Do you have any question on this one? This one is really, we have to be on the water. When you're on the water, you can see it a lot better. Let me just show you one more thing before we go to something else. So, let's try to get you. Oops. All right. Can you see this? Okay. So, I have my rod here. Make it thicker so you can see it. If I have a big leader and I want to cast right here, I'm going to cast my fly towards that direction, and I lift up my rod to get my sighter off, and my leader is going to do this. Correct? It's going to sag on its own weight, and it's going to pull my fly back at me. Okay? If you have a lighter leader, this is the kind of line you create with it. And your fly, they stay right there. So the bottom line is, you're here. Here is approximately 10 feet from you. And with a big leader, you're going to be limited to 15, 18, 20 feet, you know, somewhere around there, but not much further. With a lighter leader, you can put your fly further away from where you are without disturbing them. If you want with a big leader to put your fly there and keep them there, you need to put huge stone flies or size 6 flies or heavy weighted flies or mop flies or those type of things. And that is very nice if you have 4 feet of water. But if you are targeting a small little zone that's 6 feet long, 2 feet wide, that has 1.5 feet of water, that's not going to be pretty. So that's another reason why we use thinner thing. Oops, back at me. Let's go to the next one. So in the same spirit, we can fish now with a lighter system. We can fish the bank. So on the picture on the left, for example, I mean, all of you all guys fish. I know that. I see you on the river all the time. So, I mean, you go on the river, you arrive on the river, you look at the water like everybody else, and you see a few fish rise here and there, and you're just like, okay, I'm going to go get this one. I'm going to position myself in that position, and I'm going to be able to catch that fish and be great. And most of the time it works great. It's wonderful. But what happened next is the following. You step out of the bank and you put your foot in the water and you spook a fish that was right there. Fish are on the bank. You all know that. You all have spooked them when you walk into the river. They're right there, just like a few feet away from the bank. So if you stand in the middle of the water and you cast to the bank, you dump your fly anywhere, depending on the situation, but anywhere from 6 inches to a few feet away from the bank. You use an unweighted fly. Your tippet is going to be maximum 3 feet long. Then you have your sighter that you grease heavily and you let it float. You cast towards that destination. As soon as the fly hit the water, you count 1, 2, 3, 4. If no fish is at the end of your line, pick it up, recast 3 feet upstream. On the surface, like for example, let's say on the length of a football field, 100 yards, if you don't pick up 4 or 5 fish, I'll be shocked. I mean, it's just, they're there. So that's another thing that we can use very efficiently is fishing the bank.
How shallow will you fish Euro style?
I fished some fish. There's not enough water to cover the dorsal fin.
All right.
Yep. I mean, surprisingly. I mean, I've caught a fish in a place. I still do not know where he was standing because there's no water there. I mean, I put my fly thinking, maybe there's a shrimp in there. And I caught a nice fish. I don't know where he could have been. I mean, there's no room for it.
Yeah, I
So
understand the fish being there. I just didn't know how hard it was to fish very shallow with that setup.
well, with
With
that
the
setup,
grease, it's a different setup, right?
but it's you change your tippet, you change your fly. It's unweighted flies. And if you use a little bit of weight, you're going to use those. You don't use tungsten bead. You use those copper bead, and your fly goes down very slowly through the column. Basically, it's something that comes from the field and to the fish. And you know what? There's no danger. They're not stressed. They see something falling in front of them. Hey, maybe it looks like food. Let's try it. And that's about it. But if you try to do this with a big leader, you're not going to succeed. That's for sure. You need a thinner equipment to do this.
Antoine, I did have a follow-up question, if I may.
Yep.
So you've spoken.
Keep talking. I'm eating my ice cream.
Okay. You've spoken about how Euro-Nymphing can certainly outfish all other forms of fly fishing many times. Can you just speak to conditions and circumstances where Euro-Nymphing is challenging?
Yes, windy situation. Today was not a good day for any kind of nymphing. The wind is drastic. The wind will blow your leader. I mean, it's the same with dry fly fishing. It's, the wind is the second worst enemy of fly fishermen. I mean, the wind is just dreadful. I've canceled a lot of trips the month of October is known for to be windy. People who are beginning to get into it or want to learn something very specific, and I know the wind is going to interfere, I cancel the trip. So yes, so windy condition is a problem. What other situation that it stops me? Pretty much wind and more wind. The wind, I mean, that's what stops me dead. When it rains, there's no problem. River goes up, no problem. River go down, no problem. Shallow water, no problem. Fast moving water, slow moving water, no problem. The wind, that's the issue. Yeah.
How about trying to reach a particular area of the water? So I guess you can float your sighter to reach further. Are there limitations where a fly line can be more helpful reaching areas further away?
Yes. So Euro-Nymphing, generally speaking, everything is going to happen in a very, very close range. I extremely, very, very rarely fish more than, if I fish 35 feet, 40 feet away, that's really pushing the vice. And I will do it only in certain conditions which are, which can carry that kind of things. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And those conditions are very simple, is you're in front of an arc like this of water turning around you. You cast this way and your fly goes this way. Because at that distance, you're going to move your rod drastically. And so if the current doesn't, well, if the fly doesn't follow your current, it doesn't work. So I will, in certain circumstances, have those kind of situations where the flow the river turns around like this, and I will cast over here, and I let the fly go around this way. And you notice my finger moves a lot, but that's what the tip of my rod is going to do. At that moment, my tip is moving drastically, but it's okay because it moved my fly in an arc, but the river turns in an arc at the same direction, at the same radius. So that's the only way I will cast far away. Most of my fish that I catch using this system are usually no further away than 20 feet. I mean, they're really close. Yeah. So we can fish the bank, and then we can fish entrance of pool. That's what most people do. So that's where all the water funnels, it goes through a little riffle, and then it goes into a bucket. That's what really Euro-Nymphing is very efficient at. The water just funnels down, and then it gets into a little hole. That's ideal situation for this kind of system. We fish fast riffle, and in this picture, there's quite a bit of water, but we fish riffle that are not even a foot deep, and we catch fish in there. I'll tell you, I think I have a slide on something called the frisk. The frisk is something we use very often in that kind of water. But we can fish fast freefall. So yeah, the bank, slow pool. Oh no, the slow pool is next. Here it goes, slow pool. So slow pool, we fish them with the same idea. Is it more efficient than using an indicator on top? No, but it's possible. So that's where an indicator floating on top is more efficient, is in this kind of situation. Because the pool are deeper, the current from your indicator down to the bottom of the pool, the difference of current speed is not as great. So your fly get presented better. So in this kind of situation with a flat pool moving slowly, that's the tail end of boneyard, by the way. That's, you know, it works very well. But you can still fish with a Euro system doing this. I mean, if you don't have an indicator, you don't have your stuff with you, you can use that. So basically here what you'll do is you take your cider, you make it a bigger cider, longer one. You grease it heavily with mechanic grease. Then your tippet is very thin, a very small fly that's suspended at the end. And basically you have the flat, which is your cider, and straight down at 45-degree angle, it goes down your nymph. And you just put one, not two, because your cider will not support two of them. It's just too big. It's just too heavy. So it's not ideal, but it's possible. But ideally clean. I mean, if I look, you know, the other day I went fishing, and I carry 2 rods. So I have a dry fly rod with me, and then I have my nymphing system with me. And basically I'm looking around for a fish to rise. I don't see any fish rise. I nymph a few fish out. I keep moving. Then I see a fish rise, park my nymphing rod, get my dry fly rod out. I arrive to a pool, big pool. I'll get my indicator out, put on my dry fly system, cast an indicator with nymph, you know, floating, you know, going down the slow pool. The indicator is the way to go. So, do you have any question about this?
Antoine, I'm sorry, I do have another question.
No, go ahead.
So in the situation of carrying 2 rods, and certainly each rod, you know, has their attributes, will you ever use your Euro rod perhaps with a different spool and maybe have a regular conventional line? No.
That's a good point. So I tried to cast the idea. I did try, and I tried to cast a dry fly line with my nymphing rod. They're just not meant for this. The tip is so soft. I mean, you have to underweight your rod. My 3-weight nymphing, 2-weight or 3-weight nymphing rod. I'll use a 1-weight line, and it's still too heavy. I mean, it feels like you're casting a wet cat. I mean, it's just like, what? I mean, it's just like, you know, it's just too much. I mean, it's just not meant for it. As well as, you know, I tried to cast my leader with a, you know, an 8.5 foot 5-weight dry fly rod. I think I broke my leader. I snapped it in half. Yep, it's just not meant for it. It just, you know, it's not the right equipment for it.
So that 17-foot leader you're casting that with a Euro rod?
Yes.
Ah, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
All right. You're talking for my dry fly rod?
Well, when you're talking that 17-foot dry fly leader.
No, I use my dry fly rod. I cast my fly line, and then at the end, I'll cast 40 feet of fly line, and at the end, I have my long leader. Yes. And you'll be shocked because you use a long leader dry fly fishing, you will not cast very far because that fly is going to go very far from you. So you don't have to make a 50-foot long cast. I mean, Greenwood, you can reach the other bank by making a 20-foot long cast.
Right.
Yeah. You have another 25 feet of leader and tippet. You get there real quick. So the cast is not difficult. Yep. So no, the dry fly, I use a long leader and I cast my fly line like a regular, you know, dry fly situation. And then for my nymphing, I use a nymphing rod for my leader to cast nymph. Yes, for my Euro system. But I try to cast dry fly with a Euro-Nymphing system. It's not pretty. I mean, yes, it's possible. If you have nothing else in your hand and that's the last resort, go ahead. But it's not ideal. And you know, when you think about it, you know, I mean, the easiest way to catch a fish, you take your car, go to the store and buy one. And that's efficient. You don't need a license. I mean, it's a minimal amount of gas spent. If you change your mind, you can get a lobster, a steak. I mean, you know, it's very efficient. You can pick the size of your fish, the species. I mean, it is very easy. Here we spend thousands of dollars trying to catch a fish with a fly rod. So what's the difference between 1 or 2 or 3 of them? It doesn't disturb much. You know, get a new fly rod. You know, it's good to have. But you know,
let me talk to him. Let me have you talk to my wife.
Yeah. Don't talk. Just get it and bring it back home. You'll do the talking later.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, you're going to have to talk. So don't go get the rod and then you'll do the talking. Oh, at least you'll have the rod. To be honest with you, I bought one rod one day for one fish. So, you know, I used it on that fish and I don't think I've ever used that rod again. All right.
Antoine, have you had any luck swinging wet flies with your Euro rod?
Yes. So yes, that will work. Yes, definitely. I've tried multiple.
I'm sorry, can you use the same Euro line that you were recommending?
Yep. And what you'll do is what I do is I'll swing. That's when I do the opposite. There are 2 situations where I do the opposite on that next slide, and when I swing wet flies. So when I swing wet flies, my heavy fly is the one on top, and then at the bottom I put a wet flies. So I can have a little weight to cast that leader. Then I let it sink, and then I let it swing back up. And that works very well. So yes, you can swing wet flies with your own nymph system. It works very well. The problem with it is your swing is going to be very close range, and it's not going to be very long. So the control of your swing is not as good as with a dry fly rod. If they're, you know, I mean, dry fly rod you can cast virtually, you know, 60 feet away, and then you make a huge man, you let those things sink, and then nicely the system gets tied up, and then you swing your fly for quite a bit. I mean, that you got a long swing, which is very efficient. With your Euro-Nymphing system, you can do the same, but your swing is going to be very short. And that's bring me to the next slide, where usually, so when I Euro-Nymph, my heaviest fly is at the bottom, and my lighter fly is on top, except for that system called the frisk. So the frisk is you're fishing water that is usually less than knee deep, that moves very fast, that has little boulder that are maybe half a foot in diameter at the bottom. You have almost like pseudo choppy water on top, and it's moving. And there, what you do is you have your line like this. So I have my sider here. Here I have a heavy fly, and here I have a light fly. And so my light fly is going to stay on top. My sider is going to float. Current go this way. And that heavy fly is going to go like this. And the top of the water is right there. So you have your line going a little bit under, heavy fly, and your tip fly is smaller and stay on top. And basically that heavy fly in the middle of your system about anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 inches down and not much more. And the sider and that lighter fly with the top current speed will keep the whole thing from sinking any further. And that's very efficient. It's a very fun way to fish. So basically you fish, you're facing absolutely upstream like this. And I'm casting like this. And I cast, bring the stuff back to me. When it arrives around 15, 20 feet away from me, I pick it up and recast upstream. And I just pick my line like this. keep moving like this and just going upstream. And it's a very efficient way to fish. Fish don't see you come. Water is very turbulent, so they don't hear you come either. Chances of lining them up is fairly small. All they see is your fly going by. You know, they're ready to feed. Their fear is down, feeding is up. They see something go by, they pick it up. And they don't have time to look at it, it's moving. So they see it, they don't make a choice. They will take it or leave it. And if you see a flash in the water, just recast exactly the same spot. Basically, they missed it once, they're not going to miss it twice.
Now, you use a soft tackle or a wet fly for that light fly, or is
no,
it usually
so I'll use the same nymph that I use for my Euro-Nymphing system. The middle fly, very often I'll use not a perdigon. So I don't use perdigon for this. I want the current to carry my fly. So I use, you're right, I use probably more traditional nymph than the perdigon. Yes, that's a good point. Now that you mentioned, yes. I mean, there's so many things, you know, just you can't keep track of it. So the frisk is a fun way to fish. So what's next? This is a nice little store still in existence in Dijon. Couldn't help it. When I saw that picture, I just I gotta put that up. So what's next is nowadays my leader right now is colorful, bicolor. Then I have a piece of clear. Then I have a cider, a tippet ring, then my tippet and my fly. Well, now if you look in Europe, they have very long tippet. They have a very short leader. I've seen them last October fishing with a leader. Or that leader must have been, if it was 6 or 8 feet long, that was it. The rest is tippet. There's no tippet ring. I mentioned boiling the tippet. And then they will use different tippet diameters on their line for different purposes. So the first thing is long tippet and short leader. And what they'll do is they'll use those spaced. So those things here are, it doesn't show on my cam on your screen, but that thing is very, very fluorescent. And basically you have your fly here, you have 20 feet of tippet, and then your leader in the back, and you're fishing 2 feet of water. Well, you take this and you paint your cider right here. And then you move and you get to a place where there's 4 feet of water. You take a piece of cloth, you wipe that paint off, and you repaint it up there. That's the way to move your cider real quick. You don't have to change any of your system. It's very efficient. It's very fast. Because we move a lot, otherwise you have to cut your tippet off, you have to change your tippet, extend it, shrink it. It's a lot of work. Where here you just wipe it off, repaint it somewhere else, and that's it. So that works very well. Tippet ring disappear because the equipment becomes thinner and thinner. I mentioned the boiling the diameter of tippet, and then the different diameter of tippet that we use. So if I have, back to the board. All right, so up, screen down. So remember that knot I showed you earlier. So you have your tippet ring, you have your line like this, you got your bottom fly here, and then you have another fly here. Okay. Well, let's imagine I do my system on my own. Well, this was attached here. Okay, I had a loop like this, and I opened that loop, and now it does this. Okay. Well, let's say this is all 5x. Well, this is very nice, but it's very homogeneous. It doesn't, it's the same. The current here might be a little faster than here, which means that, it's working, but it's not great. Let's imagine I use 6x here for this, all the way to my tippet ring. So all this is 6x, okay? And then I add a piece of 4x or a piece of 5x here. I cut my bottom tag off, and so I have a bigger diameter right here. Compare to the rest of my line. Well, that bigger diameter is going to catch a little bit more current. It's going to bring this fly right here. It's going to be a lot more like this. And it's going to tighten my whole system without disturbing this fly. So the current will catch a little bit more grab on that line and pull everything a little bit. That fly is not disturbed. But now the whole system is a lot more sensitive. Does this make sense?
Yep.
Hold on. Here we go. Do you have any question about this? Well, here is one problem that we have with those thin leader. When they get wet, they stick to your rod. And when they stick to your rod, they will not let go. So that blank here, I was looking at this in Europe, I said, so what the hell? They all have those spiral on those rods. Those pieces, it's a piece of 1x that's wrapped along the blank, and you scotch tape it. And it creates all those little bumps along, and so your leader, instead of sticking completely to the blank, stick only to those little bump that shows up from those ribs. And it gets off real easy, makes your life a lot easier. So if you fish small leader, I definitely suggest you do this, because when your leaders start to stick to your rod, it's a pain in the neck. They stick and they don't come off. With those little ridge everywhere, you have all those things. Every time it creates a little ridge, the leader just stick to it, and that's it. It doesn't stick to anything else. It doesn't stick to your blank. So those are good things to use. Any questions so far? Let me see if I forgot something here. I think we're done.
So Antoine, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So those of us that fish blue lines or small streams, can we can use this system on a shorter rod, obviously, right? I mean, if I show up with a 10, 11 foot rod, it's going to be sticking on the other side, on the other bank. So, I can basically use the same setup with a 9.5, 8 foot rod on a small stream.
On a small stream, I use a 1-weight superfine. I mean, 6.5 foot long.
All right.
It's tiny. I never cast much more than 10 feet away, and that's it. And it works like a dream.
Because I almost consider this tight line nymphing almost like when I was a kid drifting garden worms through these holes. I mean, you're following the drift, and Yeah. All right.
Yeah. This is not an hallucination. This is what it is. Yep. But if on a smaller stream, a small rod, you don't cast far. It's the same idea in dry fly fishing. You're not bringing a 10 foot or 9 foot long rod in tiny stream.
Right.
You're bringing a tiny little thing, and it's the same idea. Yep. There's so many things that are similar, and it's shocking, between nymphing like this and dry fly fishing. For example, if you drag a dry fly on top of rising fish, chances are you're not going to get them. They see it drag, even if it's well presented, they're going to go back at it. They're going to look at it and say, you know what? I saw that monkey on steroids 5 minutes ago. I'm not touching it now. And you know, you drag dry fly on top of rising fish. It is not a good idea. And when you present nymph at the bottom, if you don't present them well, it has the same effect. So a bad drift at the bottom is as bad as dragging, you know, your fly on rising fish. It's exactly the same thing. Fish react the same way. They see that thing coming and it's not coming straight at them. They're coming like this. They see it once, and then when it comes like this, they go like this, let it go by, and that's the end of that. They will not touch it. So yeah, there's a lot of similarity. I mean, a lot of similarity between those two. It's just, you know, the world is reverse, upside down. We're not in the air anymore. We're down there. You know, it's like bobbing for fishing. In extremely slow pool or in lakes or pond, you'll reverse everything. So you'll, instead of having things in the air going down, you have things at the bottom going up. So you cast an intermediate line down there, that intermediate line goes down, and then you have your tippet. It goes up with a nymph, and to support that nymph, you have that bobbin fly which floats on top. And then you strip your line, it pulls the bobbin under, and then the bobbin and the nymph goes back up. That is very efficient. And that's the reverse of what we do usually, because usually we're on top of the surface, and this is just the opposite. It's just a way to attack the fish from a different way. So anyway.
Antoine, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
He looks comfy.
Do you ever fish for steelhead? And if you do, up in Salmon River, up in New York, where you can only use one fly, do you find yourself as efficient up there, or do you have a specific technique that helps you be successful up there?
So you can, I mean, I've fished up there many times, and I've tried different things. You know, you can have your indicator floating on top and your drifting nymph at the bottom. You can, you have all different ways of doing this. I personally like to swing a fly with a spear rod.
Okay. I
know it's a lot of work. I know it's a lot of cast, but it's a lot of fun. So that's that would be, I'm not there to catch a lot of fish or a big one. I'm there to have fun. So
if you were there to catch a lot of fish, like most of us, when we go up there, we just want to get a steelhead on.
Right.
What's the most efficient way that you would use to do that?
I mean, the indicator floating on top and a neck pattern at the bottom, or something purple, something very, very visual, will do the trick. I mean, it works.
Okay.
It just works. I mean, at the end of the day, those fish are not really feeding. So,
but would you use the same monofilament? And I mean, you wouldn't use the light, skinny stuff because of the size of the fish. But would you use the same monofilament? Would you use fluorocarbon? Or would you use something else?
So up there, you're looking at huge fish, not trout. So I don't use that. I use this. I will use the same system there also. The problem is when you're using that system of your nymphing for steelhead, it becomes very heavy. It becomes very tiring because the indicator is floating, holding a fly. When you use the Euro-Nymphing system, you're the one holding the fly. So let the indicator do it. Yeah, I only have two shoulders, attempt to keep them in one piece. Yeah, I mean, I've tried. It works also very well. It's slightly more sensitive, so it's more efficient, but I'm not 20 years old anymore. So it is more efficient, but it's very tiring. It's a lot of work.
Okay, we're going to be running out of time here in a minute. Antoine, thank you very much.